Hello, welcome to this latest edition of the True London podcast. I am Dave Hill. I'm the publisher and editor of the journalism website onlondon.co.uk. And my guest today is a man called Nick Bowes. Now, Nick has done lots of very interesting things in London. He is currently the managing director of Insight and Public Affairs at LCA, formerly known as London Communications Agency. Before that, he was chief executive of Centre for London, the very eminent London think tank. And before that, from 2016 until 2021, he was director of policy for Sadiq Khan. Now, Nick wrote a very strong piece for On London recently on the question of who is accountable for police services in London, and it was written in response to some new proposals by Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood, and she is proposing to reform and reorganise police services all across the country. And Nick essentially argued in his piece that the current system in London is a complete mess, and he wasn't particularly optimistic about what might happen as a result of the Home Secretary's interventions. So Nick, first of all, welcome, and second of all, can you tell our audience what exactly is wrong with the way things are done at the moment?
Well, the Mayor of London is responsible for policing in the capital. The law's very clear. But with that responsibility doesn't come the necessary powers to be able to deliver on that responsibility. You know, if I was responsible for something really important, and my head was on the block, I would want to know that within my power and within my gift were all of those key decisions that would make sure that everything was working right. And that, in the mayor's case, includes the ability to decide who is in charge of the Met Police. Why does this matter? Well, call me old-fashioned, but I do think it's really important that the public, that the voters of London, know who is responsible for their police. I think that in the 25 years since the GLA and the mayoralty was created, Londoners have got a very good idea now who is responsible when the tubes and the buses don't work. Because the roundel is on everything, Mayor of London branding everywhere, the very clear line of accountability to the mayor. If you ask Londoners who's responsible for the police, I suspect that you'll get a whole range of answers. I'm not convinced that the mayor is the answer that comes out at the top, or some people might think, well, lots of people are responsible for it, which is actually probably a better description. And I think that does matter, because I think that direct accountability does deliver better outcomes for voters, for Londoners.
Okay, now let me stop you there. So let's just look at some of the ways in which it is a mess at the moment. Though the Mayor of London is formally responsible for policing in the capital city, that person doesn't decide who runs the Metropolitan Police Service. That's the Home Secretary, and there's a sort of odd relationship between the power of the Home Secretary and the influence on that decision of the Mayor. Can you just take us through that?
Yeah, so the law is very clear. The decision is actually a recommendation of the Home Secretary to the King. But obviously, in practice, it's a decision of the Home Secretary. The Home Secretary is obliged to take account of the Mayor's views. But take account of, if there was a lawyer here, they'd tell you that you can listen to what somebody says, but you're perfectly entitled to ignore them. I think future Home Secretary could decide to totally ignore the Mayor's views. And what's more, the Home Secretary is also the only one who's got the power to sack a commissioner.
Well, I was going to come on to this. So you've got this very odd position where the Mayor is responsible, but could end up with a commissioner that he or she really doesn't want, which is not ideal. And strictly speaking, mayors can't get rid of commissioners either, although, weirdly enough, we've seen two examples of that happening. Boris Johnson effectively got rid of Sir Blair by saying to him, "Look, I just don't think you're up to the job." And Sir quite logically deduced, "Well, I can't do the job in that case." And we had perhaps a slightly messier, but in some ways similar situation with Sadiq Khan effectively got rid of a commissioner that he wasn't very happy with.
That's right, yes. You're right that two mayors have managed to remove from office commissioners that they weren't happy with. But again, that a future situation may well be where a commissioner doesn't resign in that situation. I think there is another scenario as well. Imagine a situation where a mayor is happy with a commissioner and the Home Secretary decides to sack them. If you have very polarised politics between City Hall and central government, that also is a scenario.
Not unknown, that kind of scenario, I think.
Not unknown. And
I think it would be useful to explain why we have this sort of two bosses of the Met, this whole situation of the Home Secretary and the Mayor being sort of dual bosses but not exactly equal bosses. So why is that?
So when the Mayor of London was the legislation was going through Parliament to set up the Mayor of London, the original purist vision was that the Mayor would be solely responsible for the Met Police, bearing in mind that the predecessor organisations, the GLC and the London County Council, did not have responsibility for policing, so it was a big change. Then there's a rearguard action kicked in, partly I think the traditional Whitehall not wanting to let go. We saw in other areas like transport as well as policing. But the main reason that was given was that the Met is responsible for some major national functions like counter-terrorism, VIP protection. Therefore, the Home Secretary must still have a say in the running of the police. Now, what's interesting is that the current plans, much to my pleasure, because I've long argued for this, the current plans from the Home Secretary are to remove those national functions from the Met. So therefore, you would think that removes the reason why the Home Secretary still has that involvement in the policing.
Absolutely. Now you touch on this, and your sort of ideal model would be pretty much that, wouldn't it? Correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but I think you would like to see, and other people have argued this, those national responsibilities taken away from the Met and put into what has been termed under these Home Secretary's proposals a kind of FBI-style organisation. And that would mean the Met's responsibilities were solely for policing London and Londoners. And that's the starting point of what you'd like to see, I think, isn't it, Nick?
That's right, yes. I think it'd be much clearer to the voting public. There'd be much stronger lines of accountability. I think there'd be a greater ability to shape London's policing in a way that works for London, because I think recent years have shown that it doesn't. But as long as you've got a Home Secretary that's got a bigger say in how things are policed in London, you can't make those types of changes. And Westminster's never got the bandwidth to think about, how should Hackney be policed? And why should they? That's what devolution's all about. I think there's another piece to the jigsaw, though, in that the Mayor is responsible for policing. The Mayor does not decide who runs the police. The Mayor only provides 1/3 of the funding to the police. The other 2/3 come from central government. So again, you're saying to the voters, the Mayor's responsible, but he's not responsible for deciding who runs it, and he's not responsible for 2/3 of its funding. And since 2010, we saw that a government slashed the funding to the Met and left the Mayor to defend what that meant for policing in London. That is not the right way of going about running anything.
Absolutely, and then you get these sort of rather absurd political arguments about, oh look, the Mayor's put up council tax, and the Mayor says, well look, I did it because it's to make up for the money we haven't got for the police force. And it all becomes rather circular and pointless. Now you were about to talk about protest, because this is a very interesting point, because protest, if I've got this right, and you again correct me if I'm wrong, it's a good example of how the split responsibility, powers and responsibilities, work out in practice. Because, as I understand it, the mayor really doesn't have any say over whether a protest can be banned. The commissioner, the boss of the Met, is the person who decides whether it's a good idea to ban a march, but then has to approach not the mayor, but the Home Secretary to say, would you mind banning this march? Now, that is an absurd situation, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is because I saw during my time at City Hall, and I think you've seen it since because the number of protests has just gone through the roof over recent years. That people think it is the mayor's decision, and then they either are unhappy that it hasn't been banned, or they're unhappy because it's been banned. I saw the other week one of these protest marches in Tower Hamlets that got banned, and there was social media's full of Sadiq Khan's banned our march. We even got to a ridiculous situation under the previous government where ministers, who really ought to know better, wanting to know why the mayor wasn't banning a march. Either they knew and they were being utterly mendacious for the sake of politics, or they shouldn't really have been in the job that they were doing. It feels like ancient history now, but that just stirred up this kind of confusion. Look at the power to ban marches is a protest is a extreme power, and it shouldn't be treated lightly. And there needs to be checks and balances because we've got to get that balance right. But I don't think, in terms of accountability and what the voters think, the current system is working, or what people think it is.
Okay. Just so one other thing that works at the moment, the Mayor of London, whoever that mayor may be, is required to produce a policing and crime plan, or is it a crime and policing plan? It's sort of a document which sets out priorities that he or she would like the Met to take up, essentially on the mayor's behalf. Does the Met actually have to do that?
So I think there's 2 points to this. I think you do see some evidence that the Met tries to go in the right direction of where the police and crime plan is trying to go. But of course, it rubs up against operational policing a lot, and the decisions that the commissioner feels are the police's decisions about prioritising crime. And also, we come back to the funding points. If you can have a police and crime plan with the most amazing ambitions in it, but if only a third of the police's funding is in your gift, the other 2/3 is someone else's, and they keep cutting it. It's really hard to deliver on those. But I do think the police and crime plan should be a direction of travel for the city, just like a transport plan is for TfL. And it's very clear, public document. Everyone knows it's got the Mayor of London's name on it. The Mayor of London's name is on the ballot paper. The Home Secretary's name is not on the ballot paper. Devolve and be damned, or don't do it at all. Don't leave in a messy situation like it is, because I think there's another point I think is important to make, is that I think sometimes it probably suits the Met Police that they've got 2 bosses, because that kind of that messy situation means that they can almost pick which boss it is that they want to go and get approval for something, or get the nod. I can't think of any situation where that did happen, but I can see how that could lead to that situation, because it's human nature, isn't it? You're going to do that. If you've got 2 bosses, you go to the boss that you think is going to give you the answer that you want to hear.
Okay, and just to go to a very interesting point about the police sort of hiding behind this sort of, this is operational policing, and therefore politicians can't interfere.
Obviously, there is a line beyond which decisions on policing are clearly the decisions of the commissioner and his senior team, but there is a grey area, and I think it's a grey area where it involves high-profile issues, whether that's protest or use of tactics, where it's the mayor is the one who's going to get it in the neck if something doesn't go right or it's controversial. And I think if there's one thing I would say, we've obviously had a period where we had a rise in the number of people that were being stabbed, particularly young people, in years past. I mean, it always felt like to me that when really bad things like that happened, it was the only person who was left talking into a microphone was the mayor, taking and rightfully, with the responsibility of policing. But I don't remember on some of those occasions there been the Met being all that quick to be out there and talking about some of this. So again, it's that kind of like hiding behind some of the processes. It isn't clear where the boundaries are. Maybe we need to be a lot clearer. But my view is that at the moment a little bit too much is classed as operational, and sometimes is done so deliberately to push back on the politicians. But protests are probably a classic one. Is that solely to be a decision of the police in a recommendation to the Home Secretary, or should it be more of a joint decision? I think it's an interesting debate to have, because Londoners expect the mayor to be more involved than he is, and he is accountable.
Okay, sounds like your two watchwords are clarify and devolve.
Well, again, call me old-fashioned, but maybe it's the mathematician in me. But I like everything to be tidy as possible, because I just think that I just think the public deserve it. They need, and someone the other day, in response to the piece that I wrote from London, there's some quite interesting comments, and said, look, the mayor's very happy to claim credit when crime's going down. And my response to that is, well, why shouldn't he? Because he's the one who gets the blame for it when it goes up. Of course, and we are in the situation we're in, and the Home Secretary would claim credit for it going down, but not many Home Secretaries take the flak when it goes up.
Okay, point taken. My last question. So, members of the London public watching or listening to this, and they would say, well, this all sounds very interesting and sensible, but does it mean that the police, if Nick Bowes got his way, would it mean that the police did a better job?
I like to think so, because I think there is evidence that you can point to, and quite close to home in London with transport, that where there is a very strong, clear accountability link, the outcome is better, because there are very clear objectives, there's clear lines of communication and accountability. I think confusion, conflicting objectives, multiple bosses doesn't help anyone. And I think also that has hindered the ability for the Met Police to evolve. The centre in this country is not ideally placed to know what is best for London's policing. That's for London to decide, surely.
Okay, Nick, we could be here all day, because there's lots of other dimensions to this whole issue, and it's been great talking to you, so I'd like to thank you very much, and I'd like to thank the audience for joining us as well. So goodbye for now.